Warhammer 40k Space Marines 2 is a fantastic game, and it does a lot of things right. It's honestly the main thing that got me into Warhammer, and it even got me looking into the minis for the tabletop game. Until Games Workshop looked at my bank account balance and said, come back when you're not a broke bitch. So, if you guys would help me get to 500 subs so I could be less of a broke bitch, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, on to the video. The Light of the God Emperor won't save you from the spoilers in this video, so if you guys don't want to be spoiled about this game, I would advise clicking off the video. It's not like I'm going to spoil the entire story or anything like that, but there are twists later on, but they're not really twists if you know anything about Titus, so there's a small spoiler warning in effect, just in case. Space Marines are built to be walking tanks. That is the most apt comparison I've seen in the Warhammer community. They're 8-foot-tall, heavy shock troops that roll into battle and are literally referred to as Angels of Death in the universe. Now, obviously, there are going to be a few things wrong with that because there are like billions of chapters, and some of them aren't actually shock troops, and some of them aren't very heavy armor, and some of them are more for attrition. But at the end of the day, all of them are supposed to be the pinnacle of what humanity has to offer. They are genetically enhanced to be the best soldiers that you can manufacture. But at the end of the day, they are still human, and they are still capable of dying. So the question still remains, how do you show reverence for the figurehead of Warhammer 40k, but also make them capable of losing so there are actual stakes? You also gotta make them feel like actual monsters in combat. That is something that is very important because this is about power fantasy too. This is trying to be Doom guy. You know, you want that power fantasy. Because make no mistake, if you were just made out to be cannon fodder, it'd make Space Marine fans and me a little upset. And to some extent, some Space Marines are kinda used as cannon fodder in the game, like a mission where you have to hunt down a lictor. I was a little upset that there were so many dead Space Marines, considering Space Marines are supposed to be so strong, and then I looked into the lore and I was concerned that there weren't enough Space Marines dead. I was also a little confused why they were reduced to an extremist enemy after we fought this original Lictor boss. Like, a Lictor has the collective consciousness of every Lictor ever born, and you're telling me that they haven't learned to stop swiping at me so I can hit this sick parry? But I digress. The game needs stakes. You can't just have a game where you kill everything without pushback because that gets really boring. The Space Marines need to be shown to have power, tankiness, and intelligence, but also be capable of dying. Thankfully, the grimdark future of Space Marines 2 has two things to make a dead Space Marine far more believable: swarm enemies and the grim darkness of the future. We'll talk about the grim darkness first because it's something relatively small that I don't need to talk about too much. Before I jump into something like this, let me explain that a video game is made of a million moving parts, and the reasons I have for a Space Marine being mortal can be different from what your reasons might be. There's 100 ways to interpret it, and I just want to explain my interpretation. I'm just a lowly servitor. I don't really have the best brain because it's been lobotomized, so my reasons might not be the same as yours, and that's okay. Warhammer is built around the idea of everything being dark and gritty. The Imperium is a rotten corpse of an empire, the Eldari are scattered and are fearful of being devoured by demonetization-made flesh, the Necrons are barely waking up from a nap without emotions and heavy onset dementia, the Orcs are just vibing over there. 40k is designed for the feeling of hopelessness and designed for stagnation. Endless battles of countless foot soldiers on countless worlds. The feelings of hopelessness are exemplified by what was supposed to be the pinnacle of mankind, being the Primarchs and Space Marines, are struggling to hold ground against the Xeno, the Mutant, and the Heretic. They're way stronger than each army's average foot soldier, but being limited to only having 1,000 Space Marines per chapter sounds like a fantastic way to have an extinct chapter after one nasty war. Like, if I had to wager a guess, I bet that at least half the chapter in Space Marines 2 has been wiped out. Like, if someone can explain more about how this works in the comments, that'd be greatly appreciated. But back to my point, they will all eventually fall if you just keep throwing weaklings at them. You can cut down 100, but it doesn't matter if another 1,000 are on their way. The Angels of Death are absolute mounds of muscle and armor that can gun through and cut through hordes of enemies. But it doesn't matter if the horde never stops. For the average Space Marine with his mask on, he will eventually be hit with a tidal wave of Tyranids that he just can't overcome and cut through, and eventually he'll be consumed by the Tyrant Hive Mind. I think the Tyranids were a perfect enemy to pull out for this installment. It's such a fun way to feel all-powerful, but never feel cheated when you lose. I have never felt cheated or like I unfairly lost a game against the Tyranids in this game. That is in one part due to the good game design, and the other part due to how the Tyranids are. For those who don't know what the Tyranids are, let me explain to you with a brief overview. The Tyranids are a hive mind that go from galaxy to galaxy consuming anything they find and collecting their DNA and using it against the next species they face up against. This galactic hunter is a hive mind, which means that it can communicate with every animal it has and it can create all those animals itself. Its whole concept is to try and consume every planet in the galaxy of all life and then leave to go to another galaxy to continue the process. It is a cosmic hunter that will eat everything it finds, and it will leave a planet barren of life. It will send billions of creatures to a planet to consume, and it doesn't matter if they die, because it will just cannibalize them and reuse their biomass later. It is the supreme swarm enemy, and it is one of the coolest enemies I've ever seen in any video game. People compare it to the Flood, but I think the Flood is a lot stronger, personally, and I think it's a little less interesting. Still my favorite faction from Warhammer 40k, but people like to compare it to one of the most interesting factions in Halo, period. A Space Marine can butcher all he wants. These lowly cannon fodder to you would butcher a normal man, and you're cutting them down by the hundreds. But sooner or later, you'll hear your bolter click and switch to your melee as your squad falls around you from the horde of bugs. So as a squad of Space Marines, your only saving grace is battling the hordes and leaving the planet after your mission, because the hordes are endless, and that is the genius of using them in games as an antagonist. Because no matter how strong a Space Marine is, if he's surrounded on all sides by a horde of bug dinos, dying isn't cheap, it's pretty much expected. I'm just so happy that the Tyranids are the only villain in this game, and what the fuck is that? Look fellas, I'll be honest, as a Tyranid enjoyer, I hate that they are always relegated to a secondary antagonist, to chaos or something. It's insanely frustrating not to have a game centered on cutting down swarms of creatures just to destroy a Norn Queen. But credit where credit is due, it is fun to see the Sons of Magnus as a primary antagonist faction. And they do share a lot of the swarm tactics the Tyranids have, but with a bigger emphasis on stronger Dust Marines. Hey! Someone get the serf to fetch us a vacuum cleaner! So it still fits into my general point of being swarm enemies and having more of a swarm style of gameplay. But I still wish that the one time that Tyranids were the main enemy in a game, that they just stayed the fucking main enemy and weren't like, oh, the Sons of Magnus just appeared. The Fire Nation attacked. Like, fuck. Not a big criticism of the game because I haven't been a Tyranid fan for years, so I'm not that mad, but still a little frustrating. But I do think that it's a really strong way of changing up the gameplay from moving away from the melee-focused combat with the Tyranids to the more ranged-focused combat later on. They're still swarms, but you're fighting them with your bolter more than you're fighting them with your sword. But let me get into some minor points that I didn't want to talk about for too long, and then I'll end out the video. A big part of making something feel mortal is giving them character moments, because it's really hard to connect with something behind a mask. I don't think a lot of us connected with the old Doom guy. We don't connect with him in the same way we connect with a character from a visual novel or something, because they have a lot of character moments where they talk about themselves and their views. And that's something I do like about the campaign and the operations mode in particular, where it makes it feel like they're a team and they're brothers. In the operations mode, they have jabs at each other and they talk like normal people on a battlefield. I mean, normal as a Space Marine can get in a Warhammer 40k setting. They talk to each other, they banter, and they make fun of each other. Character moments like this give us a lot of more attachment, and it also makes them feel more like humans rather than these robots that are sent to the front lines. And finally, the finishers are a good way of reminding us that these are angels of death. They will rip something apart just for the fun of it and in their fury. I love watching a Zone Throne get whipped around like a fucking ragdoll. I love watching these Tyranids be cut in half. And I love watching my Space Marine run a fucking mage through with his staff, because fuck those guys. I think the finishers are a great way of showing that these are very powerful super soldiers that can stand toe-to-toe with the worst that other factions have to offer. They are ready to fight, and they are ready to die for humanity, because after all, duty only ends in death. Hey guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a bit of a departure from what I normally make, but I love Space Marines too. I'm gonna make more videos on it because it's just something I really enjoy. I'm a big Warhammer 40k nerd now because I've just been digging into it with Wes Hammer, or Westworld, I think that's his name. I don't remember his name, but I'll link it in the description. I'll probably do a pop-up to one of his videos in the top. If you ever want to check him out and get into the lore, I highly recommend it. He does a lot of good videos on the content. Other than that, I did the call to action earlier, so I won't ask you guys to subscribe again. But if you guys liked it, please like, please comment, please dislike if you didn't like it. Basically, just give me your criticism and feedback. That'd be great. And I hope you guys have a great day.